What defines a person's worth? Is it the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or something deeper that remains hidden from public view? In a quiet cafe on an ordinary Tuesday morning, 78-year-old Harold Mercer stood humiliated before a crowd of strangers, coffee dripping from his trembling hands after an accidental collision with a high-powered executive. The public shaming that followed would have broken most men his age. But Harold Mercer was not most men. What no one in that cafe knew, what the woman berating him couldn't possibly have imagined, was that the shabby old man she was destroying had once held the security of an entire nation in his brilliant mind. That the hand she mocked as too unsteady to carry coffee had once crafted codes that protected thousands of American lives. That the quiet voice she shouted over had once whispered secrets that changed the course of history. And in just 7 minutes, 2 FBI agents would walk through that same cafe door, desperately searching for the man she had just driven away. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary people are hidden in the most ordinary packages. And sometimes, karma arrives wearing a government badge. This is the story of how one moment of cruelty collided with national security, and how the aftermath would alter multiple lives forever. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of Riverside Cafe, casting long golden rays across the polished wooden floors. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and warm pastries filled the air, creating that familiar comfort that had drawn Harold Mercer here every morning for the past 12 years. Harold, at 78, moved with the deliberate care of someone who had learned the value of patience. His weathered hands wrapped around his usual order, a simple black coffee with just a hint of cream. No fancy names or exotic blends for him. The barista Lily always smiled when he approached the counter, one of the few people who actually saw him these days. The usual Professor Mercer? Lily asked, already reaching for his favorite blue ceramic mug. Please, my dear. And how are your studies going? Harold's voice carried the gentle rasp of age, but retained the precise diction of someone who had spent decades in lecture halls. Midterms are killing me, but I'll survive, Lily replied, sliding his coffee across the counter. Harold placed 3 $1 bills beside the register, the same amount he had paid since 2018, despite inflation. Lily had stopped correcting him months ago, quietly making up the difference herself. Some battles weren't worth fighting, especially with a sweet old man who tipped generously despite living on what appeared to be a modest pension. You will do splendidly. You always do, Harold assured her, carefully taking his coffee with both hands. The cafe was busier than usual this Tuesday morning. A group of tech workers occupied the communal table, their laptops forming a barrier of glowing Apple logos. 2 mothers with strollers chatted animatedly near the window, while scattered throughout were the usual remote workers and retired folks like himself. Harold made his way toward his preferred corner table, moving slowly but steadily. His tweed jacket had seen better decades, patched at the elbows and fraying slightly at the cuffs. His pants, while clean and pressed, showed the shine of age. In his youth, he might have cared more about appearances, but now comfort and utility took precedence. The morning newspaper awaited him, courtesy of Lily, who always saved it. Harold cherished these small rituals, coffee, newspaper, and an hour of peace before heading to the community college where he volunteered tutoring struggling mathematics students. Not for money, but because numbers had been his life, and sharing that passion kept him feeling useful. He was halfway to his table when the door burst open with unnecessary force. The bell above it jangled frantically, drawing everyone's attention to the woman who entered. Victoria Shaw commanded attention without trying. At 42, she embodied corporate success in every detail, from her immaculately highlighted blonde hair to her tailored charcoal pantsuit and red sole designer shoes that clicked purposefully against the hardwood. Her manicured hand clutched the latest iPhone, while the other held a leather portfolio embossed with the logo of Shaw Financial Consultants. She strode directly to the counter, bypassing the 3 people already waiting in line. Triple shot oat milk latte with a pump of sugar-free vanilla, she announced without preamble, not bothering to look up from her phone. And make it quick. I have a meeting in 15. Harold continued his careful journey to his table, navigating between chairs and bags. As he passed behind the standing Victoria, his foot caught on the strap of a backpack someone had carelessly left on the floor. He stumbled slightly, his careful balance disrupted. What happened next seemed to unfold in cruel slow motion. Harold's coffee cup tilted. A wave of dark liquid arced through the air, splashing across Victoria's back and down her right arm. The hot coffee immediately bloomed into an unmistakable dark stain across her pristine jacket. The cafe fell silent. What the hell? Victoria spun around, coffee dripping from her elbow. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in fury when she saw Harold, trembling slightly and looking horrified at what had just happened. "I'm so terribly sorry," Harold began, reaching into his pocket for a handkerchief. "Please let me dash. Do you have any idea what you just did?" Victoria's voice carried throughout the now silent cafe. "This is a $3,000 Burberry jacket." Harold's hand froze midair, the handkerchief clutched between his fingers. "I apologize most sincerely. It was an accident. I tripped on Dash." "An accident?" Victoria cut him off, her voice rising. "Maybe you shouldn't be wandering around in public if you can't even walk straight. Look at what you've done." Harold's face flushed with embarrassment. "Please, I would be happy to pay for the dry cleaning." Victoria laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Dry cleaning? This is ruined, and I seriously doubt you could afford to replace it." Her eyes swept dismissively over his worn clothing. By now, everyone in the cafe was watching. Some looked uncomfortable, others were openly filming with their phones. At a nearby table, Diane, a 35-year-old influencer known for her everyday moments content, had her phone pointed directly at the unfolding scene. Beside her, Thomas, her 29-year-old cameraman boyfriend, had also pulled out his professional camera, sensing viral content in the making. "I can provide compensation for the damage," Harold said quietly, his dignity intact despite the public humiliation. "If you would give me your contact information, Dash." "Compensation?" Victoria scoffed, pulling out her own phone. "I'm taking a picture of this disaster, and then I'll need your information. Though I doubt whatever retirement home you escaped from has taught you about personal liability." Harold stood perfectly still, his shoulders hunched forward slightly as if physically bearing the weight of her words. His eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses that had been repaired multiple times with electrical tape, looked down at the spreading puddle of coffee on the floor. "I'm not from a retirement home," he said softly. "I live on Maple Street." "Whatever," Victoria snapped, taking photos of the stain from multiple angles. "Your name and phone number." Now, Harold carefully placed his empty cup on the nearest table and reached into his breast pocket, extracting a small notebook and pencil. With slightly shaking hands, he wrote down his information. "Perhaps we could discuss this more privately," he suggested, glancing uncomfortably at the growing audience. "There's nothing to discuss. You ruined my jacket before the biggest client meeting of the month," Victoria said loudly. "What do you even do, anyway? Besides terrorize people with hot beverages." The cruelty in her tone caused several patrons to shift uncomfortably. Yet no one intervened. "I was a professor," Harold replied, his voice becoming even quieter. "Mathematics" was being the operative word. Victoria snatched the paper from his hand. "Well, Professor, expect to hear from my assistant. Maybe next time stick to the senior center coffee hour where you can't destroy other people's property." Harold stood there, utterly still, his dignity being stripped away layer by layer before a room full of strangers. Diane zoomed in on his face, capturing the devastation in high definition. "I believe the coffee shop has insurance for incidents like this." A middle-aged man finally spoke up from a nearby table, though he made no move to actually help. "That's for their negligence, not when some ancient academic decides to play barista," Victoria retorted, then turned back to Harold. "Do you even have insurance? Or are you going to pay me in quarters from your change jar?" Harold's weathered face had grown pale, the lines around his eyes and mouth deepening with each barbed comment. Still, he maintained a certain dignity, standing as straight as his aging spine would allow. "I assure you, I have the means to make this right," he said, his voice barely audible now. Doubtful, Victoria glanced at her watch. "Great, now I'm going to be late too." "Just perfect." Lily had emerged from behind the counter with a towel. "Ma'am, I can help you clean that up a bit before your meeting." "Don't bother," Victoria snapped. "The damage is done." She turned one last time to Harold. "Maybe stick to places with plastic cups and bibs from now on." Harold closed his eyes briefly, the final blow landing precisely as intended. When he opened them again, the spark that had been there earlier when talking to Lily had dimmed considerably. Without another word, he turned and made his way toward the door, each step measured and careful, painfully aware of every eye following his retreat. His shoulders, once squared by years of standing before university lecture halls, had collapsed inward. He didn't look back as the bell jingled softly, announcing his departure. Behind him, the cafe erupted in low murmurs. Diane and Thomas reviewed their footage, excitement in their whispers as they discussed potential caption options for what would surely go viral. Victoria stood triumphant in the center of the cafe, dabbing at her jacket with napkins while fielding sympathetic comments from those seeking to align themselves with power rather than kindness. No one noticed the black sedan that pulled up outside the cafe window, just as Harold disappeared down the street. No one paid attention when two men in dark suits stepped out, scanning the cafe front with practiced efficiency before heading toward the entrance. No one realized that Harold Mercer's humiliation was about to become the least interesting part of their morning. The bell above the door jingled again, but this time with a restrained, almost deliberate quality. Two men in crisp dark suits entered Riverside Cafe, their presence immediately altering the atmosphere of the room. They moved with the synchronized precision of individuals accustomed to working as a unit, their eyes scanning the space with practiced efficiency. The taller of the two, Agent Joaquin Ramirez, stood at an imposing 6'2". At 45, his black hair was just beginning to salt at the temples, lending him an air of distinguished authority. His partner, Agent Jackson Bennett, was more compact but no less commanding. At 38, Bennett carried himself with the coiled readiness of a former military man. The chatter in the cafe diminished to whispers as the two men surveyed the room. Their attention finally settled on Victoria Shaw, who was still making a production of dabbing at her stained jacket while speaking loudly into her phone. Absolutely unacceptable. No, I need the Henderson file rescheduled. Because I'm dealing with an assault by coffee, that's why, she was saying, her voice cutting through the quiet that had descended. Agent Ramirez approached her directly, flashing a badge with practiced efficiency. "Ma'am, FBI, I need a moment of your time," he said, his voice carrying the calm authority that brooked no argument. Victoria looked up, momentarily confused before a flicker of alarm crossed her features. She quickly masked it with her usual confidence. "I'll call you back," she said into her phone before ending the call. "FBI? What is this about?" By now, everyone in the cafe was watching again. Diane and Thomas exchanged glances, their phones still recording. This was turning into content gold. "We're looking for a man who we believe was just here," Agent Bennett said, stepping forward. "Harold Mercer. We were told he frequents this establishment. The old man who just ruined my jacket?" Victoria asked incredulously. What could the FBI possibly want with him? Agent Ramirez's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes, perhaps disapproval, perhaps something more complicated. "You had an interaction with Professor Mercer just now," he asked. Victoria rolled her eyes. "If you can call him assaulting me with hot coffee and interaction, then yes. He left a few minutes ago, probably shuffled back to whatever retirement community he escaped from." The two agents exchanged a brief glance that communicated volumes between them. "Ma'am, may we speak with you privately?" Agent Bennett asked, though it wasn't really a question. Victoria straightened her spine, sensing something significant unfolding. Regarding Professor Harold Mercer," Agent Ramirez said, lowering his voice slightly, "and matters of national security." A ripple of whispers spread through the cafe. Victoria's expression shifted from annoyance to bewilderment, then to a dawning concern. "This way," Lily the barista interjected, gesturing toward a small office at the back of the cafe. "You can use our manager's office." The agents nodded gratefully. As they escorted Victoria toward the back room, Agent Bennett turned to address the watching crowd. "Folks, we appreciate your discretion in this matter. Please continue with your day." The cafe reluctantly returned to its previous rhythm, though now charged with electric curiosity. Diane and Thomas exchanged meaningful glances, switching their phones to audio recording mode and positioning themselves closer to the office door. Inside the small office, Victoria took the only chair facing the desk, while the agents remained standing. The cramped space felt suddenly smaller with their presence. "What is this about?" Victoria demanded, attempting to regain some control of the situation. "That old man spilled coffee on me. I don't see how that concerns national security or the FBI." Agent Ramirez leaned against the edge of the desk, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "Ms. Shaw, what we're about to tell you is classified. We're only sharing this information because it has become necessary due to the incident that just occurred." Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "How do you know my name? I never introduced myself." Victoria Shaw, 42, CEO of Shaw Financial Consultants. Previously CFO at Westlake Holdings until a controversial merger 3 years ago. Lives at 1842 Lakeview Terrace. Agent Bennett recited from memory. We know who you are, Miss Shaw. A chill ran through Victoria's spine despite the warmth of the small office. Is this some kind of threat? Agent Ramirez shook his head. Not at all. But we need you to understand the gravity of the situation. The man you just publicly humiliated is not who you think he is. Harold Mercer served this country in ways that will never appear in history books, Agent Bennett continued. Most of his work remains classified at the highest levels, but I'm authorized to tell you that during the Cold War, Professor Mercer developed encryption algorithms that protected our intelligence networks from Soviet infiltration. Victoria blinked, processing this information. That confused old man is some kind of spy? Not a spy, Agent Ramirez corrected. A cryptographer. One of the most brilliant mathematical minds of the century. After the Cold War, he continued his work in various classified capacities. The security protocols he designed still protect nuclear launch codes today. Victoria's face had begun to pale, the reality of who she had just publicly demeaned starting to sink in. During the Gulf War, Agent Bennett continued. His work in signals intelligence saved an entire Marine battalion from an ambush. Conservatively, we estimate his work has saved thousands of American lives over the decades. Why are you telling me this? Victoria asked, her voice having lost its sharp edge. Agent Ramirez leaned forward slightly. Because right now, we have a situation developing that requires Professor Mercer's unique expertise. We tracked him here, but arrived moments too late. We need to find him immediately, Agent Bennett added. And you were the last person to interact with him. Victoria sat back in her chair, the implications of her actions beginning to dawn on her. He's just a retired professor who dresses like a homeless person. How was I supposed to know? That homeless person attire? The professor could buy your entire company without noticing the expense, Agent Ramirez said flatly. His patents and algorithms have generated millions, most of which he's donated anonymously to educational foundations and veterans organizations. Harold Mercer is a decorated American hero who has consistently refused public recognition, Agent Bennett explained. He's been offered the Presidential Medal of Freedom 3 times and declined each time, preferring to remain unknown. Victoria's face had drained of color entirely now. Oh my God. Indeed, Agent Ramirez agreed. Now, Miss Shaw, we need your help. Did Professor Mercer give any indication of where he might be heading after leaving here? Victoria struggled to recall the details of their interaction, now viewed through an entirely different lens. I don't think so. He just left. He seemed upset. Understandable, given the circumstances, Agent Bennett remarked dryly. The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Victoria fidgeted with the edge of her stained jacket sleeve, the expensive fabric suddenly seeming trivial. The professor mentioned that he lives on Maple Street, she offered finally. That's all I remember. Agent Ramirez nodded, already pulling out his phone. Thank you. That helps. As he stepped aside to make a call, Agent Bennett fixed Victoria with a steady gaze. Ms. Shaw, I should also inform you that there's an active situation that requires the professor's immediate assistance. His expertise is crucial in preventing what could be a catastrophic security breach. What kind of breach? Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but it involves a sophisticated cyber attack on infrastructure that could affect millions of Americans, Bennett replied. Professor Mercer is one of only 3 people alive who understands the architecture of certain legacy systems currently under threat. Victoria sat in stunned silence as the full weight of her actions began to settle on her shoulders. The expensive jacket, the important meeting, her performative outrage, all of it seemed pathetically small now. Agent Ramirez returned from his call. We have his address. We need to move. As they prepared to leave, Victoria stood up abruptly. I want to come with you. I want to apologize to him. The agents exchanged another of their communicative glances. That won't be possible, Miss Shaw, Agent Ramirez said firmly. This is a matter of national security, not personal redemption. Besides, Agent Bennett added, I doubt the professor would welcome your presence after what transpired here. Victoria flinched at the truth in his words. Can you at least tell him I'm sorry? That I had no idea who he was. Agent Ramirez paused at the door. With all due respect, Miss Shaw, that's precisely the problem. You shouldn't need to know someone is a national hero to treat them with basic dignity. With that parting statement, the agents exited the office, leaving Victoria alone with the crushing weight of her actions. When they emerged into the main cafe area, the room fell silent again. Agent Ramirez addressed the curious onlookers. "Thank you for your cooperation. We'll be on our way now." As they moved toward the exit, Diane stepped forward, her phone still in hand. "Excuse me, agents? I got footage of what happened with the old man. Might be useful to you guys." Agent Bennett turned to her. "And you are?" "Diane Williams. I'm an influencer," she explained, holding up her phone. "I caught the whole thing. Was planning to post it later today. Would have gone viral for sure." "Ms. Williams, I'm going to have to ask you not to post that footage," Agent Ramirez said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It's now related to a matter of national security." Diane's expression fell. "But my followers. We'll have to wait for your next content," Agent Bennett interrupted. "We'll need copies of that footage, as well as any other recordings taken during the incident." Thomas stepped forward, reluctantly holding out his professional camera. "I got some close-ups. Better quality than the phone." Agent Ramirez nodded appreciatively. "Thank you for your cooperation. We'll need your contact information as well." As the agents collected the footage and information from the crestfallen content creators, Victoria emerged from the back office. Her normally commanding presence had diminished considerably. She moved to the counter where Lily was watching the proceedings with wide eyes. "Do you know where he usually sits?" Victoria asked quietly. Lily regarded her warily before pointing to the corner table by the window. "That's his spot. Every morning for years." Victoria approached the table slowly. A worn leather bookmark lay forgotten on the surface next to the folded newspaper. She picked it up, turning it over in her hand. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "Knowledge carries responsibility. Use it wisely. EM to HM, 1962. The gravity of who she had humiliated, a man who had silently shaped history while asking for nothing in return, hit her with full force. She sank into his chair, the bookmark clutched in her manicured hand, as the FBI agents departed in search of the unassuming hero she had so carelessly degraded. Outside the cafe, pedestrians paused to watch as the black sedan pulled away from the curb with sudden urgency, its occupants now racing against time to find Harold Mercer before it was too late. The red and blue lights reflected briefly in the cafe windows as the vehicle disappeared around the corner, leaving behind a room full of people whose understanding of importance and value had been irrevocably altered in the span of 15 minutes. 3 weeks later, Victoria Shaw stood before her office window, staring at the city skyline that once represented everything she had achieved. The glass-walled corner office that had been her throne room now felt like a holding cell as she packed her personal belongings into a cardboard box. The door opened behind her. Victoria didn't need to turn around to know it was Roger, the board chairman. "The papers are ready for your signature," he said, his tone formal and distant. How quickly 12 years of professional relationship had dissolved. Victoria nodded, finally turning to face him. "I still think the board is overreacting." Roger placed the severance agreement on her desk. "Overreacting? Victoria, you publicly humiliated a national hero. The video has 27 million views. Our stock has dropped 18%. 3 major clients have withdrawn their portfolios. I had no idea who he was," Victoria insisted, the defense sounding hollow even to her own ears. "That's precisely the problem," Roger replied, echoing Agent Ramirez's words from that fateful morning. "Treating someone that way regardless of who they are, it's indefensible." Victoria signed the papers without further argument. Her reputation was in tatters, her career effectively over at 42. The New York Times had run a profile on Professor Mercer after the White House's unexpected press conference revealing selected details of his contributions to national security. The article had mentioned an unfortunate incident at a local cafe that had led to his involvement in preventing a critical infrastructure attack. Social media had done the rest, with Diane's footage, released after the national security concerns were resolved, spreading like wildfire across every platform. Victoria's name and face became synonymous with entitled cruelty, her company dragged down by association. "Your company car service ends today," Roger informed her. "The press is waiting downstairs. We've arranged for you to exit through the parking garage." Victoria nodded mutely, gathering her box. As she headed for the door, Roger added, For what it's worth, I hope you find a way to make this right. Across town, Harold Mercer sat in an unfamiliar office at the Federal Building, surrounded by technology that would have seemed like science fiction during his early career. Agents Ramirez and Bennett stood nearby as Harold's fingers flew across a keyboard, decades of expertise flowing through his hands. That should close the last vulnerability, Harold said, removing his glasses to rub his tired eyes. The patch is elegant enough that they won't immediately recognize the defense came from me. Excellent work, Professor, Agent Ramirez said with genuine admiration. You've saved countless critical systems. Harold waved away the praise. Mathematics is ageless, Agent Ramirez. The principles I worked with 50 years ago still apply today. The room's door opened, and a distinguished man in a tailored suit entered. The agents immediately straightened. Professor Mercer, the man said, extending his hand. I'm Director Collins. I wanted to thank you personally for coming out of retirement to assist us. Harold shook the offered hand. Happy to be useful, Director. More than useful, Collins corrected. Essential. The President has been briefed on your contribution. He's insisting on thanking you himself. Harold's expression shifted to discomfort. That won't be necessary. I've always preferred to remain in the background. I understand, but certain circumstances have changed, Collins said carefully. Your identity is no longer as protected as it once was. The incident at the cafe. Harold's face clouded momentarily. An unfortunate misunderstanding. Agent Bennett cleared his throat. Speaking of which, Professor, there's something you should know. The woman involved, Victoria Shaw. I'd rather not discuss it, Harold interrupted gently. It's in the past. She's been experiencing significant consequences, Bennett continued respectfully. She's lost her position, her company's stock has plummeted, and she's become something of a pariah. Harold frowned. That was never my intention. Of course not, Ramirez assured him. But actions have consequences, as Miss Shaw is discovering. Director Collins nodded toward a tablet on the desk. We are establishing a new cybersecurity division, Professor. Given your recent contributions, we'd like to offer you a consulting position. Your experience would be invaluable. Harold considered this, turning his worn leather bookmark between his fingers. At my age, I hadn't planned on starting a new career. Consider it a continuation of your service, Collins suggested. 2 days a week, whatever hours suit you. We need minds like yours, now more than ever. 1 month later, Victoria Shaw sat in her apartment, staring at her laptop screen. Her savings were dwindling faster than expected. No financial firm would touch her, and her reputation made employment prospects bleak. The headline on her screen announced, legendary cryptographer Harold Mercer to head new cybersecurity initiative. The accompanying photo showed Harold, looking distinguished in a new suit, shaking hands with government officials. Her phone rang an unknown number. Victoria Shaw speaking, she answered, her voice lacking its former confidence. Ms. Shaw, this is Professor Harold Mercer. Victoria froze, her heart racing. Professor Mercer. I don't know what to say. I am so deeply sorry. Ms. Shaw, he interrupted gently. I'm not calling about the past. I'm calling about the future. Victoria listened in disbelief as Harold explained his new venture, a private consulting firm working alongside his government position, focused on training the next generation of cybersecurity experts. I understand you're currently between opportunities, he continued. My administrative infrastructure needs developing. Your organizational experience would be valuable. Victoria struggled to find words. You're offering me a job? After what I did, I believe in second chances, Ms. Shaw, Harold replied. And I believe people are more than their worst moments. A long pause followed before Harold added, the position is entry-level administrative support. The salary is modest compared to what you're accustomed to. But it's honest work with growth potential. Victoria recognized the position, the same role she had mockingly suggested he wasn't qualified for during their confrontation. The irony wasn't lost on her. When can I start? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months later, Harold sat at his desk reviewing reports as Victoria entered with his afternoon tea. The office was modest but functional, housing a team of 12 dedicated professionals. The Henderson contract is finalized, Victoria reported, setting down his cup. And the university program launches next week. Harold nodded approvingly. Excellent work. Your proposal for expanding the internship program shows promise. Victoria had proven herself invaluable, approaching her reduced role with humility and dedication. The journey from corner office to administrative assistant had been grueling but transformative. "Thank you, Professor," she said, turning to leave. "Victoria," he called after her. "Would you join me for the White House ceremony tomorrow? I could use a familiar face in the crowd." She paused, emotion welling unexpectedly. "I would be honored." As she left his office, Harold returned to his work, a small smile playing at his lips. The elegant mathematics of karma had balanced the equation in ways neither of them could have predicted that morning at Riverside Cafe.